Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Welcome to EQ Summit number 10, our 10th annual EQ Summit. I think this is our 6th or so here at the friendly confines of Weimar Institute. Glad you're able to join us. 5? Dr. Nedley says 5. Glad you're able to join us again this year. Was anybody here last year? Yeah, so the weather's a little different. No high winds, probably, no trees falling, no snow. This is all very good. Thank you for coming once again. You got the postcard weather this year. Enjoy Weimar and enjoy the presentations and the EQ Summit. So glad you're able to join us once again. Just a few housekeeping things before we get too far into this. There is additional parking outside of the front gate. So you may be all filled up out here, so just go out the front gate there. You can park right out there. It is a little bit of a walk, but it's nice weather, so the walk shouldn't be too bad. For the CMEs and the CEUs, I know a lot of you are participating in that. You need to go back to the registration area back there. We do have a table set up. You need to go back there once every day. Once each day you need to go back there, and you do need to do it as soon as possible because we need the before test and we need the after test. So that's very important that you get the before test done and the after test done. So that's, once again, the CMEs and the CEUs. There's a table right back there in the registration area. The back doors, those that people are coming through right there, those will be shut once the presentations start because we do a lot of filming. So we're going to have a rope on the outside of that. Please don't attempt to go out the doors there. You might experience a clothesline type experience, and we would rather not have you experience that. So we keep those closed to keep it quiet during the filming because we don't want any excess noise. Also, after the meals, please try to be here on time. The WISE Summit attendee will get back 5 minutes early to get a nice seat, and we will be starting on time, and we don't want to have you miss any of this important information. We will be live streaming for those of you who know someone who might want to watch this. The first presentation only, the keynote presentation by Dr. Nedley, will be presented free online, and that will be available at the Nedley Health Solutions YouTube website. Also, we have a car that is blocking a sidewalk. It is a white Accord Honda. Sorry to call you out already. 7MXV755. That needs to be moved into a legitimate parking spot. It is blocking a sidewalk right now. That's a white Honda Accord. Okay. Oh, hello. Hi, nice to see you. Yeah, we'll get that parked for you. Thank you. Also, for the shuttle, we know many of you are staying at accommodations in Auburn, and you will need a shuttle. You can sign up back in the registration area. It will be $20 per shuttle, but you can sign up right back there, and the shuttle in the evening will be pulling up right here to take you back to your accommodations there in Auburn. So if there's any more questions, you can contact me. We do have restrooms right down the hallway to the left, and there's also one down that ramp right there. Take your first left, and there is a restroom right there as well. Okay, enough of the housekeeping stuff. Let's get right on to our keynote presentation, and it will be presented today by Dr. Neil Nedley. Dr. Neil Nedley is founder and medical director of the Nedley Depression and Anxiety Recovery Programs and Optimize Your Brain program designed to enhance emotional intelligence. Dr. Nedley is an award-winning practicing physician who also serves as president of Weimar Institute. He has presented and published numerous scientific studies in the medical and scientific literature and is well known as a public speaker and teacher throughout the world. He is the author of Proof Positive, Depression the Way Out, Lost Art of Thinking, and Optimize Your Brain. Dr. Nedley pioneered the comprehensive depression and anxiety recovery programs and the 10-day live-in residential therapeutic program. No problem. Additionally, Dr. Nedley is a board-certified internal medicine specialist with emphasis in the difficult-to-diagnose patient, gastroenterology, and mental health. He currently is an adjunct clinical professor of medicine at Loma Linda University and serves as the constituency of Loma Linda University and the corporate board of Andrews University. Dr. Nedley and his wife have 4 sons. He enjoys hiking in nature with his family, piloting his own aircraft, snow skiing, and listening to sacred and classical music. Nothing is as enjoyable to Dr. Nedley, however, as helping people from the depths of depression and anxiety to the pinnacle of success and fulfillment. Our keynote presentation today is "The World in Crisis. Are We Doomed with the Exponential Rise in Mental Illness Worldwide?" Dr. Neil Nedley.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and welcome back for those of you who've been to Emotional Intelligence Summits before. And we also welcome our online audience. You had to register ahead of time for the online audience, and well over 1,000 people are watching online right now, in addition to our audience here, and we hope it's helpful for all of you. The additional presentations will also be live streamed, but they are not in the free category as this one is. So, of course, this is an important question. And the world is in crisis. It is in significant crisis in a large degree due to the elephant in the world that is often neglected, and that is the emotional problems and lack of emotional intelligence in society today. As you know, emotional intelligence is your ability to know and understand your emotions and the emotions of others and respond to those emotions in a healthy way. And it sounds pretty simple, but it is involved. And unfortunately, as we look at the statistics around the world, we are certainly in crisis. First, we need, because this is a continuing medical education event, we need to put the disclaimer on the screen that I am a owner of Nedley Health Solutions that offers products and programs to assist in recovery from mental illness and to enhance emotional intelligence. So let's take a look at the mental health problems throughout the world. This is the last statistics that are available, but when I was growing up worldwide, it wouldn't have been on the screen because it was less than 5% actually had a diagnosable mental illness. And you can now see that there is no country in the world that is not affected. Now, there's one that looks like it's white, a couple of them, but that's because there's no data. But for the data that is available there, that wasn't good enough to be able to put up on the map, it's clear that it's well over 5% in those countries as well. And you can see some even outstrip the United States of America. Everyone wants to come to the United States of America. We're trying to restrict access to this country to protect our citizens and those sorts of things, and so many people are wanting to come here. But yet our mental illness rate is very high compared to most of the rest of the world. But there's a couple of places that are even higher. We don't have a lot of people wanting to move to Greenland, but that would be even worse. And Australia is also worse, as is New Zealand. Now that's taking a look at a number of the substance abuse and mental health issues. And if we break this down throughout the world, we can now see that anxiety disorders top the list. Depression used to be number one or thought to be number one, but now anxiety is number one. And of course, there are a lot of anxiety disorders that fit underneath this. Obsessive compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder. We're seeing a rapid increase in panic disorder. And also generalized anxiety disorder. Depression is a close number 2, and then substance abuse disorders with alcohol and drugs, they're about 1%. Bipolar disorder, about 0.5%, and then schizophrenia and eating disorders are also mental disorders, and they are close to the bottom of the list at about 0.25%. So if we take a look at just anxiety disorders, you can see that America really does top the world here, with really about 6% of Americans suffering from an anxiety disorder, between 5 and 6%. Same with Australia, same with a large portion of South America, and even some of the African and European countries, very high as well. The last statistics available worldwide were from 2016, and you can see the rates of depression are, and interestingly, even though worldwide the rates of anxiety are higher, if you take a look at the rates of depression there, we are seeing up to 15% of some countries where a person has major depression disorder. And then when we take a look at the disability that is caused by these mental disorders, it's really astounding. And you can see that major depression tops the list. Although anxiety is more common, it's actually more common that you will become disabled as a result of depression and not be able to work. Although anxiety, of course, can also cause a disability. And interestingly, above anxiety are the drug use disorders. Once you get into these substance abuse issues, you can become disabled and really not be a productive member of society for drug use, and then anxiety number 3, and then alcohol use disorder is number 4. And although schizophrenia was near the bottom of the list as far as mental illnesses worldwide, it's number 5 as far as causing a disability, and you can see some of the others that round out the list. Another, of course, concern is the rapid rise in suicide rates. And the last year that we have seen this worldwide is in 2016. And you can see rates quite high in United States of America. You can see rates very high in Australia, many of the African countries and European countries and South American countries as well. And there are over now 1 million people worldwide who end their own life from suicide every year. That is a huge, large city, and there are some rates even higher than the United States and Australia. You can see Russia and some of the African countries were even higher, so suicide rates are not number 1 in America. Even India is now rising as far as suicide rates are concerned. In the United States, the last year that data is available, just became available actually, I think 2 weeks ago, and it showed that suicide is at an all-time high in the United States. In the last 19 years, it has continued to go up consecutively every year. And last year, 48,344 deaths by suicide. It's the 8th leading cause of death. You'll see some people say the 10th leading cause of death. Well, that's because they're separating out some of the causes of death. Sometimes they look at stroke and heart disease as separate, but they're both caused by the same thing, atherosclerosis. So if we take a look at atherosclerosis and put those together, we actually have suicide now as the 8th leading cause of death in this country. And over the last 19 years, the rate has increased by 36%. And among some age groups in America, for instance, between the 10 and 30-year-old age group, it's the 2nd leading cause of death. So, of course, death knows no age limit. Death can occur at any age, and for those of you in the medical profession, you're very well aware of this. But the 10 to 30-year-old age group, when there's a death, the 2nd most common cause is going to be suicide now. One of the great concerns about all of this, however, and when we take a look at suicides, is when we look at the country and its suicide data over the course of decades and even since the inception of this country, we see that when there's economic boom, suicide rates go down. When the economy goes down, and when the severe depression occurred, the economic depression, and even the recession we were blaming that great deep recession that occurred in 2008 when the data of the suicide rates were up then, it was attributed, well, this is what happens with economic downturns. But we have had an economic boom when we take a look at the average here in America. And we actually have the lowest rates of unemployment among some groups ever recorded in history. We have higher incomes than ever before. And actually, the lowest income levels are actually rising the highest, and middle class is rising more as well. And so when suicide rates are going up and the economy is going up at the same time, we know a business cycle is going to occur. Eventually, the economy is going down. And if we haven't solved the mental health crisis during an up economy, you can only imagine that this is the tip of the iceberg. And this can get significantly worse if we don't solve it. So with this 36% increase, there are some other statistics that are worth noting, and that is 1,400,000 just in the United States alone, in the last year that data is available, attempted suicide in just 1 year. So this is, again, if we take all the people of one of our large cities in America, that entire group attempted to end their life. Now, of course, most of those, because you saw the 48,000 or so that are successful, most of those are not successful. And of course, we're very glad that that's the case, because we do have a chance to work with their minds and to be able to change their minds, which is really what this conference is all about. But the economic problems that occur from a suicide or even a suicide attempt are pretty amazing. In other words, they cost a lot. And Obamacare did not really cover mental health very well. And so a lot of this is out-of-pocket expenses. They did pretty well on the physical health side of things, but on the mental health, there are huge gaps in getting the type of care that you need. And so military suicides are also going up when we look at the government data. They surged to a record high among active duty troops, continuing a deadly trend that Pentagon officials say is frustrating, and they are struggling to encounter. And suicides for spouses of those in the military as well as their dependents are also being tracked, and those are also very high. Every segment of the armed force has seen an increase in suicide, except the Air Force last year that did not see an increase. And then when we take a look at the cost, it's tremendous. That's how much these suicides cost our country, or attempted suicides. In other words, if you're attempted, you end up being committed. You end up injuring yourself. You might take super heroic efforts in a medical facility to save your life. And that, of course, costs money. And then the psychiatric institution costs as well. And so we're looking at $69 billion spent. That's a huge number when you compare it to even chronic diseases like heart disease and cancer. It's up there in those billions of dollar rates that those diseases are causing, and those diseases are costing. And this, of course, is very significant. If we take a look at ethnic groups, there are ethnic groups that tend to head this list, and of course, this goes into what has also happened with longevity. 3 years prior, we actually had the average length of lifespan go down in this country. And that's the first time that had happened since the flu epidemic in World War I occurred, that we saw 3 years in a row longevity decreasing, the average age decreasing, and it was decreasing due to what was called deaths of despair. These deaths of despair were not only suicide, but alcohol and drug-related deaths. And last year, fortunately, longevity went up again slightly because we have started to deal with the opioid crisis that nobody was dealing with for a long time. And so the restrictions on opioid prescriptions have actually saved some lives. And so we're seeing longevity go up again. But in general, white males are the most likely to commit suicide, 3.5 times. Also, Native American males are also up on near the top of the list, as are females. But females do have 1.4 times more suicide attempts than males. They're just not as successful, fortunately. And of course, in our program, we will have many. Of course, we have programs in the community that we'll talk about, but we also have residential programs, and we've seen an uptick even in our own program. We've been running the residential program since 2003. And in an average program, actually more than half of our program participants are actually contemplating ending their life or have already attempted to end their life. And so it's not uncommon for us to have, we normally cap it at 20 in a program, but it's not uncommon for us to have 14 or 15 of those actually seriously considering ending their life. Some of them on occasion, some of them are considering it every day. And of course, this is a significant concern, but it's one that a comprehensive program helps out with. There's one in particular I'd like to mention that came to our program after several suicide attempts, and the reason why I chose her today for this presentation is simply because she fits the demographic, as you'll see, that is dramatically worsening in their mental health, and this is the younger age groups. We'll get to that in a little bit. But she was 19 years old. She had attempted to end her life several times, and twice just before she came to the program. She was actually in a resort location with her boyfriend in Cancun, and she did drug overdose once and then was sent back to the hotel after that drug was reversed. And then she tried it again, this time with a separate set of drugs. This was a mood stabilizer that actually dropped her blood pressure and caused her to go into kidney failure. She had to be weeks in the hospital. And finally, she was able to be discharged. Her family was not wanting to deal with her anymore. She actually had a child outside of wedlock, but she had been in and out of mental health institutions. And she came to our program. Her aunt found out about it, and her aunt brought her here straight from Mexico. And a comprehensive program turned her around. She was hopeless. She had given up on life. She said she wouldn't try it while she was here, since she had never tried a program like this, but with the frontal lobe enhancing aspects through nutrition, through physical exercise, through resetting her circadian rhythm, and then actually going into the thoughts, what a turnaround occurred. And of course, one of the things that occurred, and we're going to be talking a little bit about this in some of the presentations, is the abuse aspect of things. It turns out that she was mentally healthy and normal until she was between 13 and 15, when she began to be sexually abused by a friend of the family that she didn't tell anybody about. And then when that friend of the family moved at age 15, and of course what happens is, often depending on the type of the abuse, unhealthy attachments can form, and she actually began to have an attachment to her abuser. And the abuser moved, and then from one relationship to another, she would go into highs and have high energy. She was diagnosed with bipolar. It turned out to be a false diagnosis. But then when there was a breakup, which breakups occurred rather frequently, she would go down into the depths again and get into suicidal depression. And she became hopeless just because she realized that this was the cycle of her life. She wanted to have a stable relationship, and she wanted to have one that would be healthy for her and where she'd be able to stay healthy. But when she went through the phone pictures of her boyfriend, there in Cancun, she recognized that he had been doing it with somebody else as well, who was a workmate of hers. And that's what had led her into those suicide attempts, thinking that this is just going to be the story of my life. And of course, hopelessness is the attribute that's most correlated with imminent suicidal action. And of course, it depends on what you're hopeless about. If you think that you're hopeless in regards to getting a need, that's when you start, or some people will actually start thinking of ending their life as a way of counteracting the fact that they're never going to be able to get that need. Michaela, as a result of the therapy here, began to recognize the difference between needs and wants, and she recognized being in a sexual romantic relationship that she thought was a need was actually not a need. In fact, how do you tell the difference between needs and wants? There's one question you ask: how long can I go without this before I die? If it doesn't affect that, it is not a need. And Michaela began to have insight when she recognized that no one has died from lack of sex. It's never been reported as a cause of death. It is something that might be programmed in there as a desire. In fact, it is programmed in there as a desire, but it is not an absolute need. And when her frontal lobe began to wake up, and when she began to go through the comprehensive approach, some of which we're going to see evidence from just in the last year in other centers, what a difference was made. And when Michaela left, she wasn't even thinking about ending her life, nor has she thought about it ever since. And that has now been years. She actually went without a boyfriend for 3 years while she went through college. And she was able to have a good frontal lobe to choose a wise partner. And she is highly successful today. Someone who was on 4 different drugs, frontal lobe suppressant drugs, mood stabilizer drugs, now on no medications for mental health whatsoever, and doing very well. And this is not a unique case. This is a case that we have cases like this in every one of our programs. Well, a UC San Diego, Dr. Jean Twenge, has done a lot of studies recently on the youth in our country. And she has found out that more US adolescents and young people in the late 2010s versus the mid-2000s experienced serious psychological distress, major depression, suicidal thoughts, and attempted suicide. And she was looking at all age groups, but she found out that if you were over 26, although the rates of mental illness have even gone higher in those over 26, it was a weak increase. But particularly the strong increase were in those under the age of 26. She called it a generational shift in mood disorders. We used to have depression more common the older you got. In fact, when I was growing up, I hadn't even heard of the term major depression. The term that my parents would use when someone began to suffer from it was called a midlife crisis, because that was, you were older when you began to suffer from this condition. And my parents weren't medical people, but I remember someone down the street, I asked what was going on, and that was the answer I got. And I found out that was the common word for it, because it was like non-existent in the youth and in younger people. But now we're seeing this great shift in this curve where it is actually much more likely that you're going to have depression if you're under the age of 26 than if you're over. Now, that doesn't mean if you're under 26, once you get over, you're going to be over that hump. No, actually the studies show that you actually are going to have an increased risk later on in life as well. It's going to follow you because some of those same causes might be around that bring it around. So this was a survey of 200,000 adolescents from age 12 to 17, and they were looked at from 2005 and also that same age group in 2017, and also 400,000 adults over age 18. And it was published actually just a few weeks ago in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology. The findings were that major depression in the last 12 months increased by 52% in adolescents. And 71% increase in young adults experiencing serious psychological distress in the previous 30 days. That is significant. That is a major shift that is occurring throughout our world, and 47% increase in the rate of young adults with suicidal thoughts or suicide-related outcomes. So the question is why? And Jean Twenge, when she was looking at it, was saying, you know, we've thought about genetics, but genetics isn't going to change in just one decade. The genetics are pretty much the same. And also, it's not the economy, because the economy's actually been going up since 2008 or 2009. And so this is, of course, a significant concern, and one that we're going to answer today in regards to why this rapid rise and what we can do to decrease it. Then a study came out of the United Kingdom of 16 to 24-year-old girls, and they were taking a look at self-harm, something also that's dramatically worsening throughout our society. When I was growing up, I hadn't even heard of that. You know, in my teenage years, but now there's hardly a teenager that hasn't heard about it because it's so common among the adolescents and among college-age youth. But in 1993, 1% of girls between the ages of 16 and 24 self-harmed. Not very common. Every 7 years, the United Kingdom does another survey, and in 2000, it had doubled to 2%. In 2007, it had doubled yet to 4%. What do you think it had gone to in 2014? If it's exponential, you think, well, it's going to double again. It's going to be 8%. In 2014, it was 26%. Fully 26% of 16 to 24-year-old girls in the United Kingdom self-mutilate. And this is mirroring the same data that we are seeing in the United States. Now, it is more common in women than in men, but men will be at about half that rate. So about 13% of young men between the ages of 16 and 24 self-mutilate in Great Britain, and it used to be less than 0.5%. And so when we see how common mental illness is in our society, we realize that there's only two categories of people. And that is those who know someone with a mental disorder, or those who have a mental disorder themselves. It's so common, you have to know someone with a mental disorder. It may be in your family, it may be in your community, it may be among your workmates, but you have to know someone with a mental disorder. Now, some people have mistakenly stated that I left out a third category, and that is those who cause others to have a mental disorder. But in fact, that's where personality disorders, we're going to be speaking about personality disorders, come about. A lot of those people with personality disorders, it seems like that they're actually causing everyone around them to experience a mental illness. But if you are in that category where you're causing someone else to have a mental disorder, you actually have a mental disorder yourself. So it is only two categories of people. Now, what is the #1 treatment in America for mental disorders? It is medications. And a recent study was done in regards to the efficacy of medications. And really, the efficacy is not really what we might think. You know, if you take a look there, you know, reboxetine, you know, trazodone, a lot of these are commonly prescribed drugs. They're going to improve it maybe 37% compared to placebo, maybe 49% compared to placebo. And then you have fluoxetine, which is Prozac, kind of the original new category of antidepressants, 52%. And then you can see some that have a little higher, sertraline or Zoloft, 67%. And of course, as you get towards the top of the list, the greater efficacy, you also get the greater side effects as well, with Effexor and Cymbalta and Remeron or mirtazapine causing a lot of weight gain and sedation. And interestingly, the ones that are the higher efficacy are the ones that are hardly ever prescribed because of the significant side effects. And you can see the tricyclics up there in improving things. It turns out that there are things that we can do that significantly surpass this 2.13. And if we do it in a comprehensive way, they can significantly surpass it without having to be monitored all the time. One of the issues of the antidepressant drugs, of course, is that they actually at first increase the risk of suicide. In fact, the studies show it doubles the risk of suicide. And it's kind of like, how do you weigh that side effect? You know, you have someone with severe depression, you're wanting to help them out, and you give them an antidepressant, and because it worsens impulsivity, it actually can increase the rate of suicide, because suicide is often an impulsive act. And of course, they have to be monitored and doses adjusted and things of that nature. But we're going to be modeling or talking about a better way. Back to Jean Twin, she says, young people cannot change their economics or their genetics, and this is not why the trend in mental illness. But she actually focuses in on the trend is actually due to how people are spending their what? Their leisure time. So it's not really what's happening in their non-leisure time that has changed that much in this country. It's what's happening in their actual leisure time. And one of those things that has come about since 2005 are smartphones or devices. Increasing body of evidence suggests that the time we spend on our smartphones is interfering with a number of things here that you can see: sleep, self-esteem, relationships, memory, attention spans, creativity, productivity, problem solving, and decision-making skills. And so, you know, this is kind of like a drug that has been put on society where there are benefits, obviously, of using smartphones. And we focused in on those benefits to the exclusion of ignoring these significant risks. And these risks are real and have been well demonstrated. And so one of the things that is being talked about, even by places that are not here at Weimar Institute or not particular our programs, and it's nice to see other people getting on board, is dopamine fasting as a way of reversing this trend of marked increase in depression and anxiety. There are more fun things to do than ever before in human history. More food choices, more choices on romantic partners, but overstimulation eventually makes us less sensitive to dopamine. And these smartphones are called super stimulatory devices. They actually cause dopamine release. There's YouTube videos that you can go to, and as a young person, you can get a nice dopamine release, and you continue to try to look at one YouTube video after another, trying to get this. But that dopamine actually plays a role in how we feel pleasure, and it also plays a role in our motivation. Our motivation goes down. And if we limit behaviors that trigger strong amounts of dopamine release, we can actually allow the brain to recover and restore itself. And so that's why it's called dopamine fasting. So how do you decide what to fast from? And essentially, it's pretty simple. If it's highly pleasurable or if it's problematic for you, then why not try a fast? These are things that are not needs, they're wants. Again, they're not going to shorten your life if you don't utilize it. And it actually can have some significant benefits. And so this has actually been tried in some nice studies. This is a study from Adelphi University. And this was a college course that everyone at Adelphi would take called Life Unplugged. Students did the unthinkable as part of the course. they handed over their smartphones. And this, of course, produced a lot of anxiety. One of the students, I'm freaking out now. I could probably cry right now as she's handing her smartphone over. By the way, this is no small decision for a young person in regards to this. We've actually had, and of course I still work in the critical care unit at the Auburn Hospital not far from here, but we've had admissions due to suicide attempts simply because the parents took away their cell phone. One time, the parent took away the cell phone while the person was in the car, and the girl attempted to jump out of the car in the highway and do her life in because she couldn't have the phone that her mom had just taken away from her. And so these are, the addictions are high. In fact, studies show 80% of people have an addiction to their cell phone in this age group. So a week later, this experiment just lasted a week. The professor asked, who's excited to get their phones back? And interestingly, they weren't necessarily all that excited. Gone were the nerves and the shakes. Everything is perfect right now. One of the students said, I'm having a lot better relationships. I now have a stress-free environment, no pressure at all about social media. I think it's really refreshing and relaxing, said another student. I was able to fall asleep a lot easier. They managed to find their way even without GPS for a whole week. They were also more productive. Doing homework was 100% easier. I got it done faster. I was in the zone, said one of the students. And the professor says it's important for everyone to assess their addiction. Are the conveniences worth it? Because the drawback is pretty significant. And then when they got back, they realized that a lot of their symptoms started to come back. Notifications started to pile up. Oh, wow, this is so bad. I just want to shut it off now, the Adelphi class said. Students say they're not quite breaking up with their phones, but promise the relationship will change. I want to keep that balance and figure out the healthy relationship that we deserve to have with our phones. But Victoria Dunkley would say they didn't do it long enough. She would say, in order for you to make wise decisions regarding your phone, you need to e-fast for 6 weeks. It takes that long for that frontal lobe to come back and that dopamine fast to actually produce a significant benefit. They certainly look forward to more living in the moment, they said, without it. And with the notifications shut off, which is what most of them did afterward, then do not disturb on, they were doing better. This was an interesting study among college students that were taking a business class called freshman accounting. This is just a basic kind of math class that you're taking and learning how to account when it comes to money and income and expenses and those sorts of things. But they found out in this group, they also looked at their scores and how much it related to being on social media. And they found out every extra hour on social media decreased their test scores by 10%. That's an hour per day. And it had a significant effect, and particularly among the more average students. Those that were very high, it didn't have as much of an effect, but it did have a significant effect upon the lower or average students. This was a survey of 2,000 families with children below the age of 14. They found on average they were spending 3 hours and 18 minutes a day on personal devices. That's those who were under the age of 14 spending that 3 hours and 18 minutes a day. And this polling was carried out by Census Wide, a music streaming company, and reported in the Telegraph in 2019. Interestingly, only 1 hour and 43 minutes a day engaged with family in conversations. So if we wonder why kids are more attached to their phones than their family, that certainly can be one of the reasons. And of course, that girl that tried to commit suicide by her mother taking away her phone, she obviously let the world know she was more attached to her phone than she was her mom. And of course, this is a significant concern when we're going to get into attachment disorders and the things related to that. 18% of females suffered from depressive symptoms when they were on social media 1 to 3 hours a day. If they were on at 5+ hours, 37% depression. And you can see this dose-dependent relationship. In fact, Gene Twenge from University of California, San Diego says it has to be less than an hour a day to be down there at the lowest rates of depression and anxiety. And in males, it also has a significant difference. You also see this doubling effect of 7%, 1 to 3 hours on social media a day, 15% on depressive symptoms. And interestingly, the more you're on social media, the lonelier you feel. Teenagers who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media are more likely to develop mental health problems, not just related to depression, but significantly increased anxiety, aggression, and antisocial behavior. And the study's authors said this affects our teenagers and young people internally and externally. The internal is the depression and anxiety. The external is the aggressive behavior or antisocial behavior, and you're going to see that link with personality disorders that we're going to be talking about with antisocial behavior. These negative traits were essentially non-existent among teens who reported they didn't use social media. So if you didn't use social media at all, you don't see any of those trends. And so this is the big giant change that's occurred to produce this dramatic worsening in mental health among our younger generation. But interestingly, the country's not really talking about this. You can find it, if you're looking for it. You can find the research studies. But there's only one member of Congress that's talking about it. Only one. And he's ridiculed by talking about it. He's actually a young man, one of the youngest senators, and he'll actually go around and talk, and he'll actually put bills out to try to do something about this for the country, and he's the only one. No one will sponsor the bill. And it is, but we're going to have to address this, and we're going to have to educate the public and educate our young people in regards to this. Just an example of what happens when you put a young person on social media. This was a mother who actually took a picture of herself, and it's, pixelated there so you can't see her. But she had a graphic design artist, someone that knows Adobe pretty well, actually change her face into an 11-year-old face. It was still her face, but it was 11 years old. And she uploaded the photo to Instagram. She started an Instagram account of an 11-year-old girl. And this was, she also took a innocuous selfie of what she called Bailey, and she was a mother herself. And Bailey had an ear-to-ear smile, and the caption simply read, "Very excited to see my friends this weekend at Carly's party." That's all she said. What happened afterwards? 52 teen boys and men responded within a few days. 15 of them responded within 2 hours. So the picture is posted to Instagram, and you have 15 of these people responding to this 11-year-old girl who is new on Instagram. What were they saying? "Hi, I was just wondering how long you've been a model for. If not, you should be a model. You're so pretty. You are a very beautiful girl. I love your pictures on here. Does your mom and dad let you have a boyfriend yet?" But then it goes worse. "Since we are together, are you ready to send sexy pictures to each other?" It turns out, by letting your child or teenager have a smartphone or a computer, you're exposing them to interact with the creeps of the world. And I don't know why it is that people are so excited about connecting with the world, when this is the type of connection that ends up happening. And by the end of 2.5 hours, this is now the mother stating this, she was monitoring this Bailey site. "I had 7 video calls, ignored another 24 of them, text chatted with 17 men, some who had messaged her before, gearing up in hopes for more interaction, and seen the genitalia of 11 of those men. I've also fielded and subsequently denied multiple requests for above-the-waist nudity in spite of being clear that Bailey's breasts have not yet developed, and below-the-waist nudity as well." So this is what is happening when we just are not monitoring and we let kids get on social media. And of course, many of these kids are innocent. They have no idea what's out there. They don't realize how they're going to be manipulated by people who do have IQ enough to manipulate young people, but they don't have a frontal lobe in regards to love and compassion for those. And so, what should we do? Try a dumb phone, or the old-fashioned flip phone, or actually one of the ones I like is called a gab phone. Have you heard of a gab phone? This is one that makes the teenager feel like poor because it looks like an iPhone, it has a screen on it, but the only app it has is a calculator, an alarm clock, and if you want to, a camera and a calendar. And you can call, you can text, but you can't send pictures, you can't receive pictures, and there's no access to the internet whatsoever. And so they can still be in touch. I must say, I'm not at all connected with Gab phone, so I'm not violating the CME contents, but I their advertisements in regards to helping people to decide to get out of this smartphone. But it's not just smartphones. It's screens, including computers, laptops, television, and movie theaters. This was adults. 3.5 hours per day associated with a dose-response decline in verbal memory over the following 6 years, independent of confounding variables. And interestingly, the results were found in particular among those with better cognition at baseline. So the more screens you watch, the worse your memory is going to become over time. And this was a very robust study in the range of sensitivity and analysis, and it was published in Scientific Reports also in the last year. Now, when we see this data on how much screens are being used, I've often stated, a lot of people come to me and they say, I don't have time to exercise. I know exercise might be good for me, but I am so busy. I just don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to do these things that might be healthy for me because my days are so full. So this was an interesting study looking at 32,000 Americans. This was the American Time Use Survey from 2014 to 2016. The national survey gathers information from people ages 15 and older who record their activities over a 24-hour period. And what did they exclude? They excluded grocery shopping, cleaning, cooking, eating, sleeping, self-care, such as grooming or showering, and they even excluded playing with children, since they thought if you're a parent, that should not be considered free time. And so they were really looking at free time. How much free time do you think the average American actually has? These are people that are in school. These are people that are working at full-time jobs, most of them. The group with the shortest amount of free time was women ages 25 to 60 who reported 4.5 hours of free time per day. That was 271 minutes. There was no ethnic group, there was no group that had less free time than this out of the thousands of people that they studied. In men, 356 minutes of free time per day. In women, average 318 minutes per day. Now, how much of that time do you think they were actually on devices that they didn't need to be on? Because this was not work or anything like that. It turns out 211 minutes on average of screen time per day outside of work for a male and 175 minutes for a female. And so this is getting up there at over 50%. 60% of their free time is screens for a man. 55% of the free time is screens for a female. And you really realize that people actually do have time. They just don't think they have it because it's being robbed by things that they think they, quotes, have to do. There's a general perception among the public and even public health professionals that a lack of leisure time is a major reason that Americans do not get physical activity, but the evidence shows that that is simply not the case. 6% of men's free time is in physical exercise. 5% of women's free time is in physical exercise. How much of that is an average person per day? 15 minutes. But yet, more than that would produce significant benefit in their mental health. There was a study of 33 randomized controlled trials. They showed that resistance exercise training compared with non-active control conditions was associated with a significant reduction in depressive symptoms with a moderate effect size and a number to treat of 4. So you put 4 people working out, and one of them is actually going to have their depression eradicated as a result of just doing a workout every day. And when you take a look at aerobic exercise, it's even more, replacing a sedentary lifestyle with 15 minutes of strenuous activity like running for 2 miles, or a activity was associated with potential relative reduction in the odds of developing depression by 26%. And this was published just by the Journal of the American Medical Association a few weeks ago. Studies on the best time to physical exercise. The best time for it? If you exercise before breakfast. Exercise in the morning. And it's interesting, insulin sensitivity goes up. That means you're becoming healthier. If you exercise after breakfast, it doesn't affect insulin sensitivity. So you burn more fat if you exercise before breakfast. And although it doesn't affect the weight, you're burning more fat, but the weight is staying the same, which means you're actually getting more muscle as a result of burning it beforehand. And so this is why we recommend, even in our program, the dramatic long time exercise and vigorous exercise be pre-breakfast if at all possible. Well, there's several other studies. I see. But green spaces. This was a very interesting study. Denmark having a socialized medicine system. They could see the diagnosis of depression and where it was at, and they put it on a satellite imagery, and then they found out that it was related to the green spaces. If they lived near green spaces, they had a 55% lower risk of suffering from depression and anxiety. It was a dose-dependent amount. So if they were near parks, if they were near, if they were out in the country, it actually improved it significantly. If they just had a learning disability, it didn't seem to make a difference. Then in the pre-smartphone era, this study was, but the reason why I'm saying pre-smartphone is the tendency to be a nighttime person is associated with 3 times more lifetime mental disorders. And so early to bed, early to rise is good for everybody. And it is a pattern that's particularly true even without smartphones. A lot of people are worsening this because their smartphones keep them up at night. But in reality, this will help with not only their sleep problems, but seasonal variations in mood and behavior and burnout than those who are morning people. And then, of course, nutrition also has an important role to play. This study was just published by Loma Linda University in the last few weeks, and it showed the more unhealthy food, the greater your mental health issues. It's related to moderate and even severe psychological distress. And then, of course, the other issue that's facing our world today is the dramatic increase in marijuana usage. People are thinking that this is what is going to help them get out of their depression and anxiety. And there's been 83 studies now in the last 4 decades, randomized controlled studies. And none of those studies show any evidence that the products are safe or effective in treating depression, anxiety, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, PTSD, and psychosis. In fact, a study of 50,000 Swedes showed that if you ever use marijuana, you increase your risk of being diagnosed with psychosis by 2.4 times. And if you use it heavily, 6.7 times more likely to be admitted to a psychiatric institution as a result of psychosis. Many people consider schizophrenia to be a fate worse than death. Many of those people actually don't try to commit suicide. They're not depressed or things like that, but they are a burden to a lot of society, and much of that comes about as a result of the increased marijuana usage. So expect an uptick on that until we care enough about mental illness that we care about the convincing evidence of marijuana-induced psychosis, which is very clear. And unfortunately, our country's not caring about mental illness as much as they are about business profits and about the facade that is being put on by many of those in the marijuana business trying to capitalize from it. In fact, this is the drug that's most commonly related to mass shootings. You're not seeing this, but every mass shooting that you look at, marijuana user. And part of that is due to the psychosis aspect of things. They also tend to be on drugs for depression, which worsen impulsivity as well. Well, I'll get to the rest of this presentation because we do have a time limit in my next presentation. But I want to go into some other false methods and methods that are limited in regards to mental health, and then how we can put a comprehensive approach to actually completely eradicate these numbers. In fact, I'll just go down to one of our main emphasis. We can improve and reverse this trend in mental illness by educating the public, by educating in elementary school, brain health, by educating emotional intelligence in high school and how to treat our brains, by educating it in college like we do at Weimar, where everyone that gets a bachelor's degree takes an Optimize Your Brain course and learns the ways of distorted thinking and how to correct those thoughts. These are low-cost approaches. And as you'll see, one of the low-cost approaches is less than $200 per person to actually produce a dramatic response, far better than we would get in medications or far more expensive ways. And this would save the country literally trillions of dollars down the road, because once mental illness is helped, people go back to work, they actually pay taxes, they don't drain the system from the social needs as much, and then we will have the money to take care of those who really need it. And we can make a significant reversal in this trend by educating. And this is why you're here during this course, is to learn how to educate yourself and the public so that we can not only help ourselves, but significantly help our communities around us for optimal mental health. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nedley. We're just going to have our next speaker come up. We're going to get set right here, but we're going to have just a couple minutes for you to stand up, move around a little bit, get the blood flowing, but don't go too far. Stay close to your seat, and we'll call you back to your seat.